Welcome to the Win, Make, Give podcast. Chad Himes here, joined by my friend Bob Stewart. Bob, how are you doing today, buddy?
Chad, I'm good. And the audience can't see us, right? And this is a podcast. They're listening to this on whatever podcast, device they use, but we can see each other. And so when we normally record these, we're in, when we're in
Our
room.
studio.
Yeah, we're in our studio, right? So it's you and me and Ben, and then Dave Weldon, our audio guy, will be in the room with us as well, and we refer to him all the time. But when we do interviews, most often, especially the last year and a half with COVID, right? We can't get face to face or travel as much as we used to. We do these interviews on our computer, but we can see each other. And you brought another one of these guys to the table that has like the coolest backgrounds. And if he's half as good as his background is today, Chad, we're in for a real special treat. So I'm good. I've got a little background envy, but I'm good.
Yeah, and the reason for it, audience, just so you know, is, and we'll meet our guest in a moment here, Chris, and we'll end up covering some of the stuff in his background. I can obviously see his book. I can see his beautiful cabinet he's got. I can see the guitars and the music stuff hanging back there. Bob's really envious because if you look at Bob's background, all you see is a home gym he doesn't use.
My wife got this thing in a free contest at work. Like it's taking up space. Yeah, I definitely don't use it. You know this.
Yeah, absolutely. So Bob, let's just not get any farther. Let's jump in and bring author, speaker, musician, consultant, you name it. We'll get into all these things about him. Bring Chris Edmunds to Win, Make, Give. Chris, welcome to the conversation.
Chad and Bob, I'm feeling at home already.
Perfect. Well, then this will be a fun time. Audience, sit back, laugh, relax. I have this feeling Bob's going to ask some of the typical Bob questions and take us down some crazy bunny rabbit trails at some point.
Can I start right now?
No. Chris, our audience has no idea who you are. Possibly they might know your book, Good Comes First. They might know some of your other books that you've written, which we'll talk about. Yet they don't know Chris, other than the 4 seconds I just said about you. Introduce yourself to the Win, Make, Give audience.
Absolutely. So I am pretty normal. I'm old. Next month, I turn 70. It's like I've been on this planet a long time, and I've done some really stupid stuff, but I think I've done some cool stuff too. So I've been in the business of helping leaders create work cultures that do not suck for 30 years. Wow. So my last book, 2014, was The Culture Engine. So Good Comes First, with my buddy Mark Babbitt co-authoring, just came out a couple months ago. So we are basking in the fun of promotion and getting the word out and trying to inspire leaders to consider whether or not their cultures suck.
All right. So I got a few things before Bob jumps in. One, folks, there'll be a link for the book in our show notes right there for you, of course. Two, I just want to tell you, Chris, you mentioned your co-author, Mark. We've got Mark coming for a podcast interview completely on his own. So we want to get your perspective. We want to get his perspective. I have this feeling it'll be interesting to see who tells us who wrote what and all of that. And then three, I just saw something go behind you on your cool backdrop. So either you've got a ghost living in your house or you have a pet of some sort. What did we see go walking behind you?
It is very likely that it's either my daughter's 12-year-old Sheba, who's little, and the Shiba Inu is pretty independent, doesn't really care about other humans or even other animals.
Like shoes, though. My roommate Shiba Inu used to eat my shoes, by the way. But.
This one doesn't eat shoes.
Okay,
and the other one is a mutt, who's just delightful and still a little skittish around humans, kind of, rescue dog. And our rescue dog, I don't think is back yet. So there'll be another dog wandering.
Wait, has any dog gotten more like publicity over the last year than the Shiba Inu with all the crypto stuff and the
dog coin, whatever it is?
The Dogecoin and the Shiba Inu.
Yeah.
I mean, my goodness, that is a popular dog right now.
It is. And
all right. So Chris, let's get to the serious stuff here, and then Bob will take us off.
Chad, you're such a just fun ruiner. What are you?
I know I am. And I've been told that by so many of our listeners that I'm the guy who keeps us on point. While Bob, you're the guy having so much fun there and doing all that's it. Absolutely. Chris is making that zigzag with his hand, like describing Bob very well. Chris, you help people create cultures who don't suck. Now, everybody who listens to Win Make Give wants to know more about, not sucking in general. Let's talk about business cultures that don't suck and how to create that kind of stuff. And then let's take it maybe a little internal and what I can do so that just my culture alone doesn't even suck, because not everybody's running a business.
Yeah.
Where do you want to come and start first as we talk about this culture concept?
Let's start with kind of what good comes first means, because we know it's a short, crisp, maybe even makes people curious, book title.
Yep.
But Mark and I started writing this 3 years ago, and this little pandemic thing caused us to do some major twists. And the foundation of the book and of our culture work is that leaders create workplaces that are respectful and validating for people's ideas, efforts, and contributions. Duh. And unfortunately, just by describing respectful and validating, most leaders are going to go, I don't know that we do that all the time. I don't know that we do that for everybody. So there's in essence, the foundational principle of the book is for leaders to create workplaces where respect is as important as results. And what's really interesting is and culture change is not fast. It's not easy. It takes a while. So we typically work for 12 months to 18 months with leaders, but in that time frame, they'll see engagement go up by 45% or more.
Wow.
Customer service goes up by 45% or more because you have engaged employees, duh. And then results and profits go up 35%. And of course, all senior leaders go, how much do profits go up? And you have to start with respect. And then people will sign up. They'll see that they're going to be treated fairly, maybe even civilly, maybe even respectfully, and they give it their all. It's like people will walk over hot coals to come join your company because they know it's going to be a great place to work.
Chris, where respect, where does it most often, as you come into an organization, are there obvious places where you're every single organization we go into, we look in that corner because over there is a bunch of disrespect? Are there common themes? Are there places that we should be looking around our own organization and thinking where can we clean this respect element up?
Well, part of the foundation of the work we do is to kind of take leaders through. Let's think about how you manage results, right? And performance and getting sales targets reached or whatever it is. It's like most of the time they're going to have formalized expectations. They may not meet them all the time, right? And then they're going to have accountability practices, which mostly are wildly inconsistent. But they're used to understanding that their job is to manage results. Well, we say, good for you. That's half your job. The other half is managing respect. And much of the disrespect happens. And we can go to Me Too. There's not only the gender issues, but there's social inequities that happen. But we talk about a term in the book called boomer male syndrome. Now, two old white guys calling out old white guys behaving badly is kind of an interesting place to go. But
sounds like the two guys at the Muppets that sat up in the booth.
Exactly.
Well, you're not going to change anything. You're not going to change anything unless the people doing the thing can recognize the thing, right?
Well, and it's so interesting to be able to say to leaders, so what would you love to improve? So when they come to us, and it's going to be a 12-month plus partnership, this is not a casual thing.
Do they come to
right?
you, by the way? You're not seeking them out. I mean, these people are saying, hey, something's a little bit off here. We need to...
They come to us. Okay. And they come to us typically because, as you can imagine, with the book launch 2 months ago, we're doing lots of articles, lots of podcasts, lots of video casts. So there's increasing awareness of it. But that little great resignation thing is now increasing people's understanding that if our work culture isn't civil, much less respectful, people aren't going to come back. People aren't going to come and work for us. And so the idea about where do we look pretty much anywhere we go is where we look. So we typically, Bob, do a discovery process and we interview senior leaders, next level leaders, typically select folks around the organization. And we've worked with organizations with 6,000 global employees needing translations to help with some of the interviews. But the reality is most of the time, the experience that employees have, it's very local, which means they're being disrespectfully treated by their own bosses and their own colleagues and others in their quote work environment, right? Kind of work culture. And so with leaders, senior leaders, we say if you're tolerating bad behavior by other leaders, your culture is never going to get better. So we actually take it a step further because again, we want to have, okay, half your job is managing results. How are you going to manage respect? We literally ask them to do the same thing. Define what you mean by respect. Let's get values and observable, tangible, measurable behaviors defined so that your senior leaders can model them, which builds credibility. They can coach them, which builds mentor skills. And all of a sudden, if we measure those, in other words, we do regular values surveys where direct reports get to provide their boss feedback on the degree to which they are honest, transparent, whatever the values are. Oh, that's an exciting time because typically leaders get, let's call it bad news, that what they think they're doing and the impression they're trying to make isn't as good as they think.
Okay, so Bob's original question was, is there kind of a space, right? Like, is it always in the mail room or is it always in this leader usually of blank role, the HR guy is the troublemaker, whatever it's going to be. Yet is there usually a common theme or trait that you feel is missing that our audience could sit here and say, okay, I got nothing from this interview. Bob and Chad had fun with this guy. Yet I heard that he said, the thing that always stands out is we never do blank well enough.
Yeah. Typically, and it's not a surprise, it's about recognizing people's ideas, efforts, and contributions. People do good stuff every day. And for 30 years, I've done keynotes and presentations. I say, raise your hand if you get enough praise on the job. And it's laughable. People look around and there's like 10% of the folks raising their hand. And I'll say, okay, if you're here with your boss, go ahead, raise your hand because I understand the dynamic you're living in, right? But that classic, let's call it old school command and control, autocratic kind of leadership philosophy is I'm not going to praise them because they're going to grow to expect it. I want them to be on edge. I want them to be a little chaos, right? I want them to feel like they've got to do more and more and more so they don't get in trouble. So the literal easiest way to begin to build respect is to have leaders recognize what is happening good and say something.
That's yeah. I mean,
Bob doesn't know what that feels like. And I'm saying it because Bob is very good at giving praise to others. And Bob's probably main leader, being Ben, the founder of our podcast, is excellent at doing that. He's never going to hold back praise when he thinks you. Now he'll push you. He'll crack that whip. Yet he's always going to heap the praise upon you as well.
That's interesting. Yeah. That's a challenge, right? Because where is that balance, right? Where is that balance? Because in some ways, I think that old school mentality you're talking about, that's the mentality that I first came into the workforce, as a 10-year-old working at my parents' grocery store, like you get paid to do this. That's your thanks. Right. And I think that's what a lot of bosses kind of like, hey, in fact, my wife is up against this at her company, right? She's a top-notch sales performer. And I even think that her boss is a little bit jealous of how much money she makes.
Interesting.
So he's constantly saying things that she doesn't feel respected. She's like, look, I've earned this money. I earned this. But in some ways like that, you get paid for that stuff. Why is that not enough?
It's interesting. We just saw yesterday, Goldman Sachs, the Wall Street giant, has boosted junior bankers' pay over the last 2 years. And now they're doing bereavement leave, maternity leave, paternity leave. They're doing all these cool things because they want to retain their staff. Their culture still sucks. So as you think about almost what the pandemic has offered people is a chance to reflect and to say, you're not nice to me. You don't validate anything I do. You look for every opportunity to undercut my confidence and my pride in my work. I'm out. I'm out. And so those companies, those leaders that create environments that are legitimately validating, they don't have a labor shortage. They don't have any of those issues. And what's interesting is that employees are learning, have learned, they have a voice and they have a choice. And that is pretty powerful. And so, one of the things that we really started on with the manuscript 3 years ago was talking about future of work and thinking about different generations in the workplace. And that Gen Xers have kind of had to, they've come into being leaders in a pretty old school management philosophy culture. They've had to model crap behavior, demeaning, dismissive behavior. Well, now you got Ys and Zs looking at this and going, no, that's not how you're going to inspire me. I want growth. I want opportunity. I want to work from Brazil on a project in Tokyo, right? And boy, those opportunities are much, much greater today than they were before. But if leaders don't understand that without respect first, people are going to walk. That's going to cost you a lot of money.
Now, respect is going to bring you almost the right to then crack that whip when it's needed.
It is.
Right. And that's the thing. If we come in cracking the whip, Chris, is what I'm getting from what you're saying. If we come in cracking the whip, no, we're going to turn off all the Gen Ys, the Gen Zs, the crybabies that are out there right now. That's the gen that I
could
think
be baby boomers.
Forgive me, all of you, right? We went from baby boomers to cry babies, right? On all this stuff. Look,
all of us.
But if we're respectful to our workers, the people that are following us, our co-workers, not even to our own leaders, then when the time comes to need that voice for the choice, as you said, I like that we are in a position to actually be able to present that or ask that or demand that because of the respect that's been there.
Well, and there's an earned right of commitment that most leaders think, I'm the boss, I have a title, right? I'm going to drive these decisions whether you like them or not. And it's like, I don't actually care about people being committed to the company. I don't care if you're happy. I just want you to work. And that crack the whip thing is, yes, we did this production okay, but now today it's a new challenge. We have to do that. And where there are employees who feel valued and respected, they will kick butt. They will solve problems for you before they become forest fires.
Should I care if people are committed to the company? Is that, I think of our organization. We've got a lot of positions that, they can, I wouldn't call those like end of the career positions. In fact, in many cases, they're beginning of the career positions. Yeah. And I just think like how dedicated to our company could that person be that, sits at the front desk or whatever? And should I worry about it?
Well, and I would say it's going to serve you well if you worry about it. And if you begin to invite people's opinions, there's nothing more fun. Okay, this is slightly cynical, so hang with me.
We love this stuff. Bring it.
Then helping senior leaders realize that their ivory tower viewpoint of the way the business operates may be vastly different than people's day-to-day experiences, which means you have to ask. Well, if you ask, be careful because you're going to learn that X was promised, never delivered. I don't trust anything you promise now. And I've been here 20 years and I don't trust a thing you say. So there's credibility issues. But what's interesting now with again, younger generations, with again, the voice and the choice is like, if you don't care about the experience I'm having, I mean, even if you don't go for a respectful experience, but you go to civil is a huge jump for 90% of the work cultures out there. because they're not civil and they're not fun, except for maybe the few that are teasing others. That's an interesting dynamic. And so there's a place to go that says, and I used to ask this of leaders years ago. I said, would you want your kids to come work for your company? And then, well, I got 2 kids that do. Well, are they happy? I don't give a rat's behind if they're happy. Yes, you do. Yes, you do. And what's interesting is, oh God, the stories. I used to collect saboteur stories about folks that would, let product stay outside in the rain and get ruined. And oh, it's a $20,000 order. Oh, we have to do that again. And they knew full well, but it was part of the I have to fight.
That's
this is a battle.
I mean, somebody that does that they've lived in that regime so long, they're just resentful, right?
Yeah.
We talk a lot about the idea of resentment and the way it can destroy a culture, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and what we look at is if you're going to have performance expectations for people, then you need to be honest. You need to coach them. You need to validate the stuff they're doing well, but you need to crack the whip. If they're not doing that well, at the same time, thank you for all the work you do. I appreciate this. And yes, could a pizza party help with some of that respect? Yes, but it's not as important as being literally validated for the work that you're doing. And it's very interesting. And I wonder about, I guess us old baby boomers are starting to retire out of our leadership roles. And yet the people that are in line to succeed us have been trained to do everything we did the same stupid way.
Right. Yes.
And they demean and they dismiss and they don't show respect for even the people they walk to work with, right? Or ride the train to work with or whatever. It's going to serve you very well, and it's going to let you have, oh my God, more fun at work.
Okay, you've said that word a few times, so hang on a second, because again, as Bob's already broken the fourth wall, audience, and he's told you we can see each other.
Yeah.
So Bob, I just want to ask you, what are you wearing on your shirt and your hat? You're wearing one of Ben's company logo things, right? Now I look over at my other screen here and I see Chris, and Chris, I can see it on the sleeve. You're one of our kind of people. You've already gone out and got the hoodies or the sweatshirts that are advertising the book, the company, and all that stuff. How much is that kind of stuff, just that uniform and stuff, creating that fun atmosphere? And how else can we bring fun into our cultures?
Well, the first thing that you've got to do is make sure that the culture that you have is not toxic. Because if you throw pizza parties at it or kiggers at it or foosball tables at it, you're still not creating a quote bond where people feel valued. And so, yes, it's interesting to look at how much of our Bob and I are clearly willing to sell our souls, right? To kind of advertise organizations that we believe in. But what's very interesting is, and this goes back to Gallup's engagement stuff. And by the way, we've been throwing money at engagement, $30 billion over the last 20 years, and it hasn't moved it a single tick. So we still are pretty stupid about what to do to build commitment and community. And God love Gary Ridge. I've known Gary for a long time, president, CEO of WD-40's company. And he followed this values process, and they have a tribal culture that is designed on a couple things. One is learning moments, not mistakes. Now, wait a second. This is an interest. It makes sense. I promise it's going to link to the fun thing. Just wait.
Okay.
So the learning moment thing is if I make a mistake and I hide it, somebody else is going to make that mistake. If I make a mistake and I share it, fewer others on my company's side will make that same mistake. Gary says all the time, let's make new mistakes, right? Let's not make the same ones over and over again, because that's just stupid. So the idea of the tribal culture, which comes from Gary's growing up in Australia and the Aboriginal tribes there, is like, we all aren't going to have this company be successful if we're not working with one heart, one mind, one voice. So he really builds it. And the fun that they have a teepee in the lobby of their new company headquarters. It's not new anymore. It's probably 5 years old. But the whole tribal thing is very interesting because you talk about, right, wearing logos, but it's about the pride. It's how do they talk about, would you recommend somebody to come work for your company? And their engagement level at WD-40 for the last 10 years has been 93%. They measure it every year.
Well,
Well,
sure. If
you
they have
can,
any problem with someone, they just apply WD-40 and they slide right out, and
they
it's not a
just
problem anymore,
slide.
right?
That could be another solution. That's interesting. Good. But it's as you think about a 34% range across most US companies of engagement,
Yep.
and internationally it's like 20%, they're doing something really, really right.
Sure. Okay. So the fun isn't necessarily the pizza parties. The fun comes from having our own language. The fun comes from the branding, the wearing the stuff together, to feeling like we're a team. I mean, that's why the football team all dress the same, because they're connecting and being a unit like that.
Yeah, and boy, can we take the sports metaphor into some cool places.
Sure.
But what is interesting about the fun idea is that I can have fun at work if I'm growing, if I'm being given, new opportunities and I'm having to learn cool stuff and I make mistakes and I don't get crucified for it. That's a different level of, and again, we go back to the respect and validation. Those are the two pieces that have been so powerful for the client successes we've had.
I want to go back to the like the acknowledgement, and it is I was doing some research. You have a thing where you got to have companies put together a constitution.
Yeah.
Do I have to go through that whole process, or can I just say to all my senior managers, hey, let's just start like high-fiving our people more often? Like, does it have to be this formalized thing, or can we take like little mini steps, or do those little mini steps just not really move the needle?
It's interesting. We've seen great success in small pockets, and we call them pockets of excellence. And it really means that a leader, and she might be a leader of a 5-person department or 20-person department, just starts to kind of implement some ground rules. And so they're an organizational constitution, but on kind of a first level, and say these are the 6 ground rules we're going to work on for the next 3 months. Let's see if it helps. Let's see if it helps coordination, cooperation. Imagine that, fun. And so it doesn't have to be some organizational thrust, right? They just start to kind of create an environment where there's less stress, a little bit more creative problem solving, and people, in essence, right, embrace it as their own.
Like,
right?
what would a couple, like, let's just say, and make up the problem and lack of respect, whatever it is. Like, what would be 2 or 3 things on that list that we would work on? Like, in my head, I'm like I love the idea of we celebrate mistakes or whatever. So like we bring our mistakes to the table so everybody knows that it was a mistake, and we high five and go, we're never going to make that mistake again. Like, I can see that being something. What are some other like real tactical types of things that a team of 5 might do to try to improve that cohesion?
One of the things that we emphasize is that in the workplace, there's always too much to do, right? There's always folks doing other stuff. There's always competing priorities. So let's settle on a rule that says you're going to do what you say you're going to do. So that means if I make a promise to you guys, I got to show up. I have to follow through. And if I'm going to miss it by 24 hours or a week, I have to tell you. Well, that then still is following up. And it's like X happened, Z happened. There's not enough truckers to get the materials to Salt Lake, whatever it is. But that I do what I say I will do all of a sudden raises everybody up to say, I'm making promises here. And in the past, my leaders haven't kept their promises, so I haven't kept mine. You've got to keep your promises. So another one is don't lie, cheat, or steal. That's an interesting one because we have a very divisive society. It's not been terribly different over the last 5 years than it has the last 30, but we've got interesting rules around lying. If you're in politics, it becomes part of your natural script. It's like, no, you're kind of lying. It's not truth. and therefore it's not fact, which means it's a lie. You can't go beyond it. And if you begin to build your company on lies, I had an interesting, as we were looking for publicity firms to help with the book launch, we had gotten introduced to a lady who said, I was in corporate public relations for 20 years and I got tired of lying for a living. And I thought, oh, that hurts. But it's an interesting kind of philosophy about if I'm lying to my own team members or maybe even a team across the country that's relying on me, nothing good's going to come of that. And greater trust isn't going to emerge. It's going to erode it. Greater respect is going to be eroded. So do those two help?
Yeah. Can we stretch the truth? Can we make a small story a big story?
Bob's good at that. That's why he's here on the podcast with us. He's good at taking those stories.
Just gotta blow them up a little bit. Just put a little air in them. Give them
Chris, here's what I want to ask you. All right, so we got this book called Good Comes First, and the subheading is How Today's Leaders Create an Uncompromising Company Culture That Doesn't Suck. And I love it. And you've given us already some great tips. Yet what I always like to make sure of is on the Win, Make, Give podcast, even when they're business conversations, we focus on the complete person.
Yeah.
So good comes first. How today's people create an uncompromising family culture that doesn't suck. Go.
Oh, baby. So it's wonderful.
And I'm writing your sequel for you right now.
I like it. Right? I'm loving where this is going. What's interesting is that today we spoke to a gentleman who's a brilliant marketer and helping us with our next phase. And he said, everything you're describing about treating others with respect and holding people accountable, right, for their promises, their commitments, sounds very much like parenting. And I said, well, for the people that do parenting well, yes, it's very similar. And all of us had weird families, right? All families have got weird dynamics. I think I have a world record. God rest my dad and mom who passed at 91 and 97, right? So, but growing up under, the family experience of folks that were born in the 20s, that's an interesting dynamic. The Depression, sure. There's so much of the life experience that drove that. And so I would come home, right, as a middle school kid, because that's when we get to be sarcastic to our parents. And I'd say, our football team did great today. The coach never praised anybody. He was never happy about anything we did. And that's kind of frustrating. My dad said, well, you kind of got to, understand suck it up, figure out your role and praise yourself. And it's like, no, that's what the leader needs to do. So it's been very interesting. As we work with leaders, we often push them to say, how have you used this with your family? And how has that changed your dynamics? And I remember a leader who had a teenage son, again, pushing back on parenting, and his son, he asked him about doing X, whatever it was. And the son said, Dad, have I ever done anything right? I'm 14. I feel like I've never done anything right. And he went, bam, like a baseball bat to the forehead, thinking, I praised more people at work today than I have him in the last month. And so it starts to shift to say, he is doing some cool stuff. And I know my dad never, X or Y praised, recognized, celebrated, encouraged, but I can do it with him. And I remember a gal who said, my husband, after all these years, is now praising me for some of the work I do around the house because we're both working, 100 hours a week, right? We're exhausted. But he finally is praising me for, a creative meal I did last week. And I thought, that's awesome. But we can get into habits where we are looking for people doing things wrong. And we get really good. And even we can be cutting and communicating that we've noticed this. And if there's no validation and encouragement and celebration, that's not going to be a relationship that's going to pay off in the long run.
Yeah.
True.
I just want our audience to hear, right? All the things that we talked about for the first 25 minutes of this conversation about a business culture can come home.
Yeah.
Right. Can absolutely come home. And now we can chicken soup theory series your book, and we can have good comes first at home and good comes first in raising your kids, and good comes first over the holidays, and we got a whole series coming here for you now, Chris. So
I love it.
you can send me residuals and copies and
easy
go with all this.
Absolutely easy. I'll order the shirts for you now.
Perfect. Perfect. We will wear them proudly, as we love that kind of stuff.
Cool.
All right. So Bob, you've been talking about his background. You haven't mentioned anything yet. You've actually gotten really into the conversation, which I love. But before I bring this to an end, what is it that you really want to ask Chris about that's hovering in the background?
I have two things. The first one is I'm fascinated by the first initial. So you are S. Chris Edmonds. What's the
true.
S?
Stands for Stephen.
Okay.
And when I grew up, I was called Chris from the moment.
Really?
So I would get into kindergarten and someone would say, Stephen. And I'm like, no, it's right. And it's just disconnected entirely. So I don't know why they didn't do Christopher Stephen, but whatever. Let's move forward about 30 years. And I'm traveling. I've got 2 million miles under my belt on American Airlines alone. And 9/11 happened and security changed. And all of a sudden, your tickets have to match your driver's license and passport. And I'm going, again, at the gate, got an upgrade. And they're going, Stephen, I didn't pay any attention because that wasn't what I was trying to do.
Sure.
So the interesting thing, I'll go back. There was a fabulous running back, I think, for the Bengals, African-American, talented young man named Chris Edmunds. And I thought, I'm going to use the S because I don't want people to confuse him for me. Oh, for God's sake.
All right. And then
Chris, I'll just tell you before Bob points out what everyone else, don't worry. I did the same thing to my daughter. We go by her middle name.
That's hilarious.
The day she was born, it was by her middle name. She's always been called by
Simone, right? So
Simone is her middle name.
What's her first name?
Her first name is actually Anna, and she is.
Why didn't you just name her Simone then?
Because she was named for somebody. So she was given that name as her first name, but we've always called her Simone because that's what we wanted to name her and use. So
it works.
By the way, Chris, I'm a Robert E. Stewart Jr., which before 9/11, you never put a junior on anything.
Oh, no.
And then all of a sudden, I had my ticket had to match my ID. And I got held up only once at an airport right after that. But here's another question. Was that a Fender? Like what is that amp in the background? I feel like that's a really nice old, and if Dave was in here, our audio guy, he'd just be like salivating over that amp back there.
That is a 1966 tube amp. It's a deluxe reverb, 22 watts. It will break windows at 22 watts. Been completely hand built because, of course, all the capacitors dry out and stuff like that. And there was a guy in Denver, God rest his soul, he died about a year ago, who was a tube amp guru, and he was a crusty dude. He was a crusty dude. And I brought this amp into him. He says, I can't look at it for 6 months. Whatever you need to do, it's fine. And it was about 6 months. And I went in to pick it up. Again, kind of doing the bowing down. I'm not worthy. And he said, that's the best deluxe reverb I've ever heard. And he did Derek Trucks amps. So it's that tube warmth and that coolness. Although in the band I'm in now, there's another amp upstairs that I use because I'm too afraid to take this out on stages.
Yeah, if that guy's gone, he can't fix it for you anymore. If you
can't. I found another guy that may not be as good, but it's a cool old Fender amp, and it's what I grew up looking at on TV. With amps behind bands and stuff. They were all Fenders back then.
Yeah. Chris, if it goes missing in the next week or so, that was Dave editing our episode and then realizing you have it and showing up to take it.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
All right. So, Chris, we're here in season 2 of the Win, Make, Give podcast, and we're living up to that give in season 2. I wanted to ask you, we want to make a donation to a charity to thank you for joining us here, not just to promote the book, yet just for taking your time and joining us. What charity is it we can make a donation to?
It is the Foothills Animal Shelter in beautiful Denver, Colorado. I posted the foothillsanimalshelter.org website, and that's where we got one of our pups. They just do a great, great job. And boy, what an interesting dynamic for most shelters over the pandemic timeframe.
Yeah.
And they've had airplanes, right? Volunteers flying airplanes full of puppies that shelters in other parts of the country just don't have enough staff. They don't have enough money. They can't feed those animals. So Foothills takes them all. So it's like, that's where I'd love you guys to send your support.
We will absolutely do that. And hopefully our audience will all check out foothillsanimalshelter.org. They can check it out as well. We really want to thank you for coming. You set the bar really, really, really high because podcast audience, we want you to remember, this is just part one of Good Comes First because we have Chris's co-author, Mark Babbitt, joining us for part two. Let's hear the same stuff from someone else and hear what comes out and how different it comes out from the guy who helped write the book with him. We've been, boy, fused at the hip through 3 years. So I know lots of his stories. I bet you'll hear some more. Well, we look forward to them. We appreciate you joining us here. Audience, we hope you join us in our Facebook group, which is facebook.com/group/win-make-give, where we keep the conversation going after the fact. And until our next episode, as always, do good.